James Morgan Cross, born in Akron, Colorado, 3/7/29.
Tell me about your family background and the school you went through.
Well, I was born in Akron. My father was a farmer, but his dad had died when he was young. So Dad gave up the farming, and we were living in Akron, Colorado.
Mm-hmm. And how about your siblings?
Oh, there were 9 kids in my family. I was the first one.
First one?
Yes, sir.
6 boys and 3 girls.
6 boys and 3 girls.
Uh-huh.
There's 3 boys left now.
What was like being for eldest son in the family of 9 kids?
Every time one of the other kids did something Dad didn't like, he'd come after me. He said, "You're the oldest, you know better than that." And he'd whack the heck out of me.
What school did you go through there?
Well, I went to school, went to kindergarten in Akron. And then I was in school in Fort Collins. Oh, I went to many schools through my years because Dad was a transit worker. He worked on construction work, and we moved lots of times. I mainly got my education in Idaho Springs.
Idaho?
Idaho Springs,
Uh-huh.
35 miles out of Denver.
Uh-huh.
That's where I basically got my education.
And when did you graduate high school?
I didn't graduate.
Uh-huh.
I quit school the year of my graduation,
When was it?
1946.
1946. You quit.
No, but the last time I was over there, all my classmates were gone.
Gone for what?
They didn't live a clean life, I did, I guess.
Yeah.
What did you do after you quit the high school?
Worked in logging and road construction.
Ah. Did you make good money out of it?
Oh, yes. I went into the Army in it must have been September of 50.
19 what? What year did you?
Must have been 1950.
1950.
The
When?
year the Korean War started.
Huh?
The year the Korean War started.
And do you remember the month you joined the army?
September. I didn't join, I was drafted.
Drafted. September. And where did you go to receive the basic military training?
Fort Ord, California.
Uh-huh. Tell me about those basic training and what was your specialty?
Infantry. That's all I ever studied was infantry. Because I wanted to be a truck driver. I wanted to be an engineer. But everybody that wanted to be an engineer got in the infantry.
Really? And then what happened to you?
After I got out of basic training, I was sent to Japan for 3 months of occupational duty.
Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, I went to school in Japan and learned to be a soldier.
What do you mean, what school did you go in Japan?
Whatever infantry does.
Oh, so okay.
Basic training. Then I was shipped to Korea. After 3 months in Japan, I was shipped to Korea.
So when was it? Was it 1951 you arrived in Korea or 1950?
I'm sure it would have been 50.
51. Because you said that you were drafted in September of 1950.
I'd say it's 51.
51. Do you remember the month?
Well, it would have had to been, let's see,
February?
I would say January, February.
Where did you land?
We went into, you mean into Korea?
Yes.
We went in there.
Was it Busan or Incheon?
Busan, I think.
Uh-huh.
We got in there at 1:30 in the morning. It was black dark.
Mm-hmm.
And I was amazed. Everything was so small. The railroads were small, the people were small, everything was small. We got there at 1:30 in the morning, then they put us on a train. When I woke up the next day, I was in Seoul.
Mm.
And any of you got that book on Korea? There's a picture of Seoul in there, modern. And when I woke up in the morning, what I saw was not Seoul, Korea. I wrote and told my mother, I said, I never knew there could be so much devastation in one place in the world.
So you wrote to your mom saying Korea was devastated.
It was ruined.
Tell me more about the scene that you saw in Seoul when you arrived there.
Well, little kids mostly, digging in the ground, they had pots and pans, they were gathering stuff out of the ground and putting them in these pans.
Why?
To eat, I guess. They didn't have anything to eat. We had candy bars, we had lots of candy bars. And those kids gathered around us, you couldn't even get through them. They wanted candy bars. And we gave them candy bars. And I've always thought that must have been really nice for those kids to come up there to a big old rough-looking soldier and get a handful of candy bars.
What were you thinking when you saw them clinging to you and asking for candy bar?
I came from a large family, and I was thinking these kids have got it a lot rougher than I ever had it. I never had to live in stuff like that. And I was always glad to give those little kids candy or sea rations, whatever. If I had something and they wanted it, I gave it to them. Because I could get more.
Right.
And I had a deep feeling for home because, as I say, I came from a big family. And when I saw all those little kids running around, they had no home.
So what was your mission in Seoul? Where were you? Were you located in a school building, or what was your mission?
We were put in a barracks and then put on a train and sent farther in. We went clear across Korea 3 times. I walked across Korea 3 times.
What do you mean, Han River or 38 parallel?
We didn't get to the 38th parallel. We did go up to the Chosan Reservoir.
Were you at the Joseon Reservoir too?
I went as the army relief. I was in the army when we went and relieved the Marines. Those Marines took a beating up there like you wouldn't believe.
Tell me about those scenes. You went there to help Marine coming out of it, right?
Actually, there were a bunch of engineers went in with us with big bulldozers, and their main task was to get the road open so the Marines could get out. And I knew some of those engineers personally after I got out of the Army. They went in with big bulldozers, and that was their whole job, was to get roads open, get where those Marines could get out of there. Well, I walked all through that. I went into the area where the Marines had been. And those poor guys, when they left there, they had buried whole boxes of new rifles, new ammunition. They put them in a hole and then throw a smoke grenade in on top of them. But they buried a lot of stuff up there. And I picked up backpacks, helmets, all kinds of pieces of uniforms that had literally been blown apart. I was a squad leader in an combat infantry unit. That was my whole job, was combat. And I was a squad leader, and I spent. After that, one of the times after Chosun was when we walked across Korea. It rained, it snowed, it did everything. And we walked clear across that country. Crossed the Nakdong River 3 times in one day. Wading in that river 3 times in one day. We get on the other side, we take our boots off and dump the water out, put them back on. I spent 20 months on Heartbreak Ridge.
After that,
Yes.
so were there any close encounter between your squadron and your squad and Chinese or the North Koreans on the way back from Jangjin Lake?
Well, the only contact we ever had with any enemy on one of those marches, one day we were, well, this is going to be 2 stories. One day the march was stopped. There was 13 Marines in a pile.
Oh.
They had no clothing on. Their boots, of course, were gone. That's the first thing they ever did. When they got a man down, they took his boots off. Because they didn't have boots. Anyway, there were 13 Marines in this pile, and they had all been executed, shot in the back of the head. Big blue flies crawling all over them. If I would have seen any Chinese after that, he'd have been dead. I had no feeling for them at all.
Does that bothers you right now?
It goes through my mind periodically.
How does he react when he has nightmare at night? What do you see him doing?
Well, we're talking about 60 years ago. We've been married 60 years.
Uh-huh.
And it was during the early years of our marriage, but he'd wake up screaming, and very upset.
Did a lot of cussing.
And I didn't know what it was all about at the time, but he would tell me, about the experiences of his friends being killed right beside him, and like he said, finding the bodies, and it's hard. And back in those times, I don't think in the service they tried to deal with it.
By the way, what is your name?
Phyllis.
Phyllis?
Phyllis.
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 And when did you marry to him?
In 1954, February. So we've been married 60 years now. And I met him in 1952 in June, same time that he came back from over there, and he still had some time left at Fort Carson in the Army before he was discharged, but that's when I met him. Just right straight back from all that.
And that doesn't improve any better? PTSD?
Yeah, it's better, certainly. Over the years, it fades, and gets better.
One time only was I scared. The rest of the time I was mad, wanted to get even.
When was it that you feel scared?
When we were on Heartbreak Ridge, there was a rule in effect there that every frontline soldier would have 1 hot meal a day. Well, we were up on the ridge, and we had to go clear down off the ridge into a little valley back there and get our hot food. And we couldn't eat it down there. We had to eat it, had to get back on the hill to eat it. But we got that hot meal every day. Well, that one night, there was an engineer working up on top of the hill very close to where my position was. And he was cutting holes in the top of the ridge. You know this. And they would put a tank up there in those holes, made them a pillbox.
Made what?
They're like an artillery piece.
Uh-huh.
We had one tank up there that took 105 direct hits. But that was the way to do it. Anyway, this time we went down there and they had our hot meal. And you had to get everything all put together again before you could go back up on the hill. So I'd already finished my meal and had my canteen, my mess kit folded up, everything I'd in my pack. And you get to the end of the line, and there was a kid there at the end of the line who would give you a handful of candy bars.
There was a Korean kid at the heartbreak.
Oh, in America, it was GI, a soldier.
Oh, soldier.
He'd give you a handful of candy bars.
Uh-huh.
I bent over there and I said, "Give me my candy, Bailey, I'm going home." And I bent over like this, and all hell broke loose. That's the last thing I saw for a little bit. When I woke up, I was out in the street, my helmet was off, my rifle was gone, and I scrambled around, got everything all put back together, and I went back over to Bailey again, and he was lying there with half of his head gone. And I was scared. I was scared. But that's the only time I was ever scared. The rest of the time I was mad.
Why were you mad?
Because of what they were doing to us. Anytime I saw some of those Chinese, I'm going to say, soldiers, I would try my best to stop them right there. When I was on Heartbreak, I was a squad leader, and I could show you a picture of my old position there. There were 3 trenches came down the hill, and my position was on a little wide spot right at the top of the hill. That's where all the patrols left from. That's where they all came back to. But we had a 50 caliber machine gun set up there. We called it a 50 sniper. And all we had to do, it had a scope. All we had to do was sit there and watch across the valley. And whenever somebody moved over there, we'd take them out. And with a 50 caliber gun, you can do that. And we did a lot of that, awful lot of it.
If you are given a chance to meet with the Chinese soldier that fought against you at the time,
Just as prisoners.
What would you do if you meet them again?
Now,
Yeah.
probably shake their hand.
Huh?
I'd probably shake their hand.
And?
Because I know they were thinking one thing and I was thinking another. When we were on Heartbreak, I always thought there's 20,000 Chinese right over there, and they want to come over here and get us. And we're not going to let them do it. And we did a lot of fighting on that hill, a lot of fighting. But that was a whole different thing. I hated everybody. See, they didn't have uniforms even. We called them pajamas that they wore. And they didn't have real boots like we did. Their boots were like slippers.
Yeah.
So we didn't even consider them soldiers. We were soldiers. I took a lot of pride in that. Whenever somebody saw me walking around, they said, "There's an American soldier." Because that's what I was, and that's the way I acted, and that's what I did. One time when I was back in my position, our company commander called me to come down to his CP. He called me at night a lot of times to go out and walk with him. Well, that night we went down there, and I And we walked over the edge of this. There was a hill called 362, I believe, on the other side. And we were supposed to take that hill.
Mm-hmm.
We were going to. That hill was under bombardment 24 hours a day, either from B-29s or from artillery. And we were going to go over there and take that hill. Well, my time was up. I was supposed to come home.
Mm-hmm.
And the captain and I were standing down there looking across there, and he said, "Cross, you're the best soldier I've ever seen." He said, "If I had a company of men like you, we'd just walk across that valley, and when we went up the other side, there wouldn't be any Chinese left over there. They'd all leave when they saw us coming."
So
Made me feel really good.
so what did you do?
I was supposed to come home.
Yeah.
So next day or two, I shipped out to come home. The last night I was there, the Chinese attacked us. And their mistake was, there was another company coming in as my company was going out. So there were twice as many Americans there as there should have been. Killed 9 of them right there in the trench. Right there close to my position, killed 9 Chinese soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys were going to take over the country. And the next step was to take over the USA. And that wasn't going to happen.
You thought that they're going to attack USA too?
Yes. And I wasn't about to stand still for that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was a draftee.
When was the most rewarding moment during your service?
When I got the word to come home.
That's the happiest moment. Rewarding.
Oh, well, the best I ever felt was when I realized that there was no way they were going to be able to chase us off of Heartbreak. Every time they'd come up there, we'd run them off. Every time. I knew that they could never take that hill back.
Did you write letter back to your family or your friends or
Right to my mother and my dad quite often.
what did you write to them?
Tell them how it's cold, and I couldn't wait to get out of that country. From the time I went into Korea until I left, I never felt like I got a breath of fresh air. When we got off of that ship that night, it smelled really bad. And then when we loaded up to go to Japan, that was good. We went from Korea to Japan to home.
When did you leave Korea?
Oh, I can't really say.
1952?
When did I meet you, fellas?
June of 1952.
It would have been 52 then.
June of 1952.
That's when he was back where I met him in Delta. Yeah. Anyway.
So he was about.
So you have a very clear picture of what Korea looked like 60, 70 years ago. And do you have a picture of now?
Yes, in that new book.
What is that new book?
The
Korea Reborn.
that you gave us.
Korea Reborn.
Oh, that's a wonderful book.
Yeah,
You've never been back to Korea, right?
No, I never was.
But you now know what happened to Korea through that
Oh,
book.
yes. In fact, if you go through about the first half a dozen pages in this book, the first page that I looked at was Seoul as I saw it that morning when I got up. And then on the very next page was the new Seoul. Lights and just beautiful. That was my. But the first thing I saw was just terrible. Little kids crawling around in the dirt.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason I've ever wanted to go back at all was to see the place like on Heartbreak where I was for so long. That's the only reason I ever wanted to go back. I've had that hillside in my mind ever since.
Wow.
Heartbreak Ridge. That comes into my, once in a while at night, I turn over and there's that ridge right there. But it doesn't stay with me, it doesn't haunt me. But that's the one thing that really stays with me.
What do you think about why you were there and why you fought against communism?
What I think about my service is I'm proud to be a veteran. I'm very proud to be a veteran. And I won't stand still for a minute for anybody to try to run down the veterans.
I'm sorry, you said that you were drafted, right?
Right.
Yeah.
US 550-787-69.
Now we don't have draft system. What do you think about that?
I was drafted, but there wasn't anything I could do about it. But I don't want to see my kids drafted.
Right.
I don't want to see my kids have to go over there like he did, like I did, like you did. I don't want to see any of my kids go back over there to that. All I do now is sit there and watch the TV and cuss. And I can't do anything else. But while I was there, I felt like I was doing some good.
Why do you think it happened to your life, that you had to fight for it, and what is Korea now to you?
Well, I like the way Korea looks right now, especially South Korea. They're doing the right things. I'm not sorry I went over there, but I wouldn't want to do it again under the same circumstance.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for your honesty, but that really, really mattered to us.
Well,
That's why we are here.
The 60 years we've been married, I've never felt that Jay felt like he was truly appreciated for his service in Korea until right now.
Anything you want to add to this interview?
well, like I said, I don't want to go back and do it again, but I'm glad we got it done.